unfortunately, a lot of my Indonesian clients, for example, they see me without the knowledge of their parents or their extended family because there's a lot of shame still.
Nah, ada stigma kayak gimana lagi sih? Dan what are the long-term effects mungkin juga?
Even when they want to express their stories, like, oh, I'm actually worried that, like I will be called like, mental tempe atau mental tahu. And
Yeah.
because those kind of, sayings are like, or if I'm seeking help, aduh kayaknya kurang beriman nih gitu.
Tapi for Indonesians yang baru sampai sini and they're hesitant to reach out for therapy or mental health help gitu, what advice would you give them? What are the first steps that they should take? Hey everyone, I'm Billy and welcome back to the Perantau Podcast, di mana kita ngomongin para perantau di Australia itu ngapain aja sih. Hari ini kami kedatangan Angela Utomo, seorang psikolog dan dosen di Victoria University berpraktek di Melbourne. Nah, sebelum kita lanjut lagi, aku pengen say thank you aja udah meluangkan waktu hari ini. Dan if you had to summarize what you had to do for work, what would that summary be?
Oh, well, pleasure to be here. The summary would be teaching and helping. Is that summarizing enough?
Teaching and helping. Kalau misalnya katakanlah lagi nongkrong sama teman-teman atau keluarga dan mereka nanya, Angela, kamu di kantor ngapain sih? Gitu. Biasanya jawabannya tuh kayak gimana?
Biasanya, sitting in front of my computer for hours and hours. But I would be, it varies because I'm a registered psychologist, but I also work at Victoria University as coordinator in governance and events. So I look after accreditation of courses and all the events that are run in the college, like student awards, open day, and so on. So it's never bored, nggak pernah bosan. And I also do teaching in counseling and psychology as well. So yeah, that's why in summary it's teaching and helping.
Nah, jadi and I think it's really interesting gitu, and to explore more of your work gitu, both in psychology tapi as well as itu balancing that governance of the university scale as well gitu. But before we get into that, aku pengen nanya dulu nih, in one word, dalam satu kata aja, kata apa yang bisa menggambarkan hubungan Angela dengan Indonesia?
Loyal.
Loyal.
Yes.
Kenapa loyal?
Karena walaupun saya udah di sini, mungkin udah lebih dari 15 tahun, tapi saya tetap I want to keep my, I guess, cinta budaya, dan I try to stay loyal to my roots. So even like in day-to-day basis, like, when I even going to work, sometimes I wear my batik to go to work. I share my, my love of Indonesian cuisine to my colleagues at work. Even when I look into my waiting list of clients, I always tell the reception if there's an Indonesian client that really needs an Indonesian psychologist, I would like to prioritize that because I know it's very hard, especially as a migrant. And when you seek help, you want to talk to people who understands your language, understands the norms and culture that you're coming from. So yeah, I want to make an impact. Although I'm far away from Indonesia, I still want to make an impact to my Indonesian community.
Jadi even from the small things to the big things, dari cuma pakai batik sehari-hari, bawa makanan, tapi even with handling Indonesian clients itu, from the small to the big, pun tetap loyal gitu
loyal,
ya.
Yes.
Loyal ke tanah
Bisa
air.
dibilang ya.
Nah, speaking of your Indonesian clients in your clinical practice, berapa sering sih dapat orang-orang Indonesia?
Nggak terlalu banyak sih. Mungkin setiap bulan mungkin satu.
Oke.
Ya.
Tapi lumayan, berarti sebulan pasti ada aja satu gitu
pasti
ya?
Pasti ada satu.
Dan mereka bisa ketemu Angela, tahu nama Angela karena referred by someone else yang orang Indonesia juga, atau googling psikolog Indonesia siapa gitu?
Kebanyakan googling Indonesian psikolog karena again that I guess that language barrier, right? Karena kalau mau curhat ya pasti enakan pakai bahasa kita sendiri kan. And then also sometimes they're pastors. So I work in it is in a Christian psychology clinic, but we see everyone from any faith. So sometimes their pastor refer them to us, but also sometimes schools. Like for example, we have minors from Indonesia, international students, and they have issues with adapting to the Australian culture. So sometimes schools say, obviously we don't have an Indonesian school counselor, but we have funding for 4 sessions or 5 sessions. Can you please assist this student?
Nah, jadi you practice in both bahasa Indonesia dan Inggris gitu ya,
Yeah.
tergantung kliennya siapa, of
Yeah.
course, dan tergantung preference mereka juga gitu kan. Nah, jadi pertanyaanku sekarang, how does language and culture shape the way we seek help gitu, dan gimana sih itu mencerminkan cara kita minta tolong gitu. Sedangkan itu balik lagi ke bahasa kan, it reflects a different part of us gitu, dan tergantung kefasihan kita dalam suatu bahasa juga gitu kan.
Yeah.
Kadang-kadang ada bahasa yang lebih nyantol ke emosi kita, kepada hati kita gitu kan. Jadi cara kita menonjolkan kita butuh bantuan gitu, itu kan juga beda gitu. Jadi dari pengalaman Angela sendiri, both in clinical practice tapi as well as in your personal life, how does these 2 languages shape the way we express distress?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a Western country like Australia, we have a lot of shared languages around help seeking, around even mental health, right? It's people use the word, oh, I'm traumatized, things like that, like even in day-to-day basis. Meanwhile, I think from other cultures, there might not be specific words to describe, depression or anxiety and things like that. So I think even through that shared language that can shape people's help-seeking behavior. Another thing is in terms of coming from culture, I think stigma is a big thing. So unfortunately, a lot of my Indonesian clients, for example, they see me without the knowledge of their parents or their extended family, because there's a lot of shame still in seeking help professionally for mental health issues.
Nah, biasanya kalau orang Indonesia, mereka ngomongnya gimana? Masa gimana ya pertanyaannya? Sedangkan biasanya kalau misalnya Inggris, kayak like what we said, there's more, it's more ingrained in the language. Okay, I'm traumatized, atau
Yeah.
I need help gitu. I feel depressed. I'm suffering from chronic anxiety atau apa gitu. The lexicon is already adapted for the English language gitu kan.
Yeah.
Nah, tapi kalau misalnya orang minta bantuan dalam bahasa Indonesia gitu kan, so that it speaks closer to the heart. Bahasa seperti apa sih yang mereka gunakan gitu?
Bahkan mereka kan suka susah. Mulainya dari mana ya? So I always actually encourage my clients to come in with notes. So
Okay.
how do you, like, what are your moods? Can you just track your mood, and if you can come up with feelings and thoughts and journal it, and then bring it back to the next session.
Jadi sebelum datang udah diminta bikin PR dulu ya?
Yeah, especially for the next session. Like
Yes.
first session biasanya emang susah gitu kan, mulainya dari mana gitu kan. Tetapi namanya juga human suffering and human struggle. I think people express that in their own way. So, some people would I just keep that stigma keeps stuck in my head, because I think that's a very significant challenge for Indonesian clients. Even when they want to express their stories, like, oh, I'm actually worried that I will be called like mental tempe atau mental tahu, and
Yeah.
because those kind of sayings are like, they're quite common in the society, or if I'm seeking help, aduh kayaknya kurang beriman nih gitu, kurang berdoa, kurang ini, kurang itu gitu.
Iya, ntar dikatain lembek lah gitu, lemah lah.
Yes.
Anak-anak zaman sekarang gitu kan. Nah, tapi
Lebay.
iya makanya bener yang kayak masa gitu doang nggak bisa sih gitu kan.
Iya.
Dulu ya gini
Iya,
gitu.
dulu lebih susah gitu kan.
Makanya. Nah, tapi kalau misalnya pas dapat klien yang bercerita seperti itu gitu, Angela bisa ngomongnya gimana gitu? What's your approach to letting them know that it's okay gitu? Apalagi terutama dengan klien-klien orang Indonesia.
Well, first I try to connect with them, like understanding. Yes, that's something that I hear often when I was living there, or even after moving here in some communities, I still hear those kind of languages. But then normalizing that their experiences are very human, and all humans have struggle, have suffering. I think just normalizing those feelings and emotions that they have.
Nah, ada nggak sih kayak Indonesian phrases atau peribahasa yang atau mungkin kata-kata sehari-hari dalam bahasa Indonesia yang susah diterjemahin ke bahasa Inggris gitu. Sedangkan that also plays in terms of how we connect with our emotions, tapi also how we rationalize what we feel gitu kan. Nah, ada nggak sih yang kayak dari, dan ini mungkin lebih ngomongin ke orang Indonesia yang di Melbourne antara kerja atau studi gitu kan, and they have trouble expressing themselves in English misalnya. Nah, have you ever had any experience klien-klien yang begitu dan mereka ngomongnya di kepalaku tuh kata-kata bahasa Indonesia ada, tapi pas mau ngomongnya tuh nyangkut terus, and then it also makes them frustrated gitu loh. Ada nggak gitu?
Ada sih, cuma I can't remember on top of my head what those phrases are.
Yep.
Tapi biasanya karena mereka tahu, I understand Indonesian and I'm
Jadi
a
keluarnya
native
Indo
speaker.
juga gitu.
Jadi ya udah dicoplosin aja pakai bahasa Indonesia, and then like yes, and then we would laugh and like yes, that's exactly what you're feeling. So I think again that's why it's very important to have that shared cultural knowledge when you seek help from a professional, because that it's just easier for you to express those feelings and struggles.
Sekarang kalau kita ngomongin tentang Indonesian culture, sebenarnya balik lagi ke ada stigma itu tadi gitu kan. Ada stigma, terus dikatain mental tempe lah, lembek lah atau apalah gitu. Nah, jadi apa sih peran, what kind of role does Indonesian cultural norms play in terms of how Indonesians seek out mental health gitu. Misalkan karena bagi para migran setidaknya yang udah meninggalkan Indonesia sekarang di sini gitu kan, they've also had a reset in terms of their environment gitu, the people around them gitu. Mungkin sampai segini mereka lebih nyaman untuk nyari bantuan karena nggak ada yang secara langsung judge mereka gitu kan. Mereka merasa lebih aman juga gitu.
Lebih aman,
Nah,
yes.
secara stigma itu gitu, sebenarnya stigmanya kayak gimana sih gitu? Apa perwujudan dari stigma itu?
Perwujudan dari stigma itu, coba, can you like
elaborate? Yes.
elaborate about the question?
Misalnya itu, tadi kan ada satu contoh yang kadang-kadang mereka belum tentu ngomong ke orang tua gitu, atau mungkin pasangan mereka gitu, karena takut dihakimi gitu kan. Nah, jadi stigma-stigma yang seperti itu yang seringkali stops them from seeking help in the first place gitu kan. Dimana akhirnya beneran sampai udah slow-nya banget gitu, baru mereka kayak I think I do need help gitu. Jadi stigma seperti itu yang contohnya it prevents them from seeking help in the first place gitu kan. Nah, ada stigma kayak gimana lagi sih, dan what are the long term effects mungkin juga?
Well, ada juga stigma tentang masalah yang mereka hadapi, right? So for example, pre-migration, like they might experience discrimination because of their ethnicity, for example, back in Indonesia, or their sexual orientation. So those things are, you probably don't even think about asking for help back in Indonesia. But here, although you might not share it, openly with your Indonesian community, but it's more acceptable to, I guess, explore, your issues around sexual orientation or discrimination and seek help for those things. So I think that's probably another example of stigma and how it's better or it's easier to address the issues once you've arrived in Melbourne, in Australia.
Jadi for your Indonesian clients that you found here selama beberapa tahun terakhir, biasanya apa sih top 3 masalah yang mereka datang ke Angela itu, tentang apa?
Pressure, family pressure,
okay.
Ya. Apalagi ada ekspektasi kan, kalau misalkan udah pindah ke Australia, udah disekolahin, mahal-mahal, you need to succeed. right? You need to be, A game, your A game, and also there's also still that pressure of, sending money back home, helping those who are still, masih berjuang lah di tanah air gitu kan. Ekspektasinya, kalau udah nyampe ke Australia, you're better than us, or you should be better basically. So there's a lot of anxiety around that. That's probably one. Second, probably finding, feeling that they can belong here. Banyak orang-orang yang kesini dapat kerjaan, tapi kerjaannya itu di bawah kualifikasi mereka. They have to kind of retrain here, right? They have to start from scratch. Dan banyak masalahnya juga banyak stigma tentang beberapa pekerjaan kan. Mungkin kalau di Indonesia ya cleaner itu mungkin lesser than, but then here, yes, you get paid as much, but there's less stigma about that. But still, for some people, it's a struggle to, I've learned to become, an accountant back home, and here I'm a cleaner. So, feeling like, they have stability, and I guess feeling like they belong. I think that's also another challenge for Indonesian migrants. So that's second. And then third, especially with, working holiday visas, obviously a lot of people see it as a great opportunity. But then sometimes they bring their kids, and the kids are uprooted without their, consent or without their consultation. So banyak disruption di rutinitas mereka sebagai anak-anak, sebagai teenager. So they lost their social support. So there's that increased sense of isolation, which can lead to depression and sadness, and so on. So that's probably, there's varied issues, but I think that's the three common ones.
So you also specialize in handling children and young adults kalau nggak salah ya, and teenagers. Nah, and I think it's really interesting that you brought up how some people migrate here, bukan hanya mereka sendiri tapi sama keluarga mereka juga gitu kan. Misalnya contohnya kayak tadi gitu, yang kesini dengan anak kecil terus they're uprooted dan di sini cuma beberapa tahun terus balik lagi gitu kan. Karena orang tuanya sendiri juga they're also uncertain about their personal future gitu kan.
Betul.
Nah, biasanya kalau untuk keluarga kayak gitu specifically, masalah apa aja sih gitu? Kayak could you share a case study with us gitu, an example di anon aja nggak apa-apa, tapi could you share a real life example of what they face gitu?
Ya pertama-tama itu kan ketidakpastian akan pekerjaan, mungkin masih sambil nyari-nyari di sini. Jadi that's financial stress, right? That's number one. And then second, the kids having to adjust to new systems, or even parents having to adjust to new systems. Gimana sih cara pelayanan kesehatan di sini, the healthcare system, or even the childcare system? How does it work? So adjustment to that. And then for the kids, language barriers. I mean, I think Indonesians are quite privileged in terms of our English language skills. I think we probably learn it from junior, even primary school, right? So that's probably not so much of a big issue, but still having to move to a different country and then learning everything in English, that's a big challenge. And I think if it's okay to mention as well, like we come from a pretty colonized mindset, right? We've been colonized for, we were colonized for 300 years on whatever. And then we moved to a Western country. And we kind of feel a little bit less than, there's that sense of intimidation. Aku ingat, kalau boleh share even my own personal story. When I was a student coming here, the class was talking about Bali 9, if you remember. That's like years and years ago. And then I was like, this is about my country. This is about, my country's law. But I'm just an international student. Like, do I participate? Like, even to raise my hands, like, you kind of feels very hard. So, those kind of challenges, like, how do you feel confident coming here? And you probably have more knowledge or more resources, but how do you express that in the new setting? I think that's something that I'm passionate about, helping people with.
Jadi especially people from a migrant background, most of the time it's to do with the self-esteem gitu ya. Terus apalagi kalau misalnya tadi kayak ganti kerjaan karena kesini WHV atau apa, and they have to settle for quote-unquote less gitu. That there's also that ego factor juga gitu kan. Kayak dulu di Indo gue kerja accountant di SCBD, tapi sampai sini masa ngepel doang sih gitu kan. Padahal mungkin gaji dia sama gitu
Iyalah,
kan.
atau
Ya kan?
lebih ya
Atau
kan?
lebih gitu, atau bahkan lebih gitu. Tapi then there's also that, balik lagi ke stigma itu kan.
Iya.
Stigma bukan hanya dari keluarga atau lingkungan, tapi dari diri sendiri juga gitu kan. Karena mereka sejauh ini merasa I should be better than this gitu. Padahal kenyataannya ya, well, what is better? It's all relative gitu kan.
That's right.
Yang penting kan our own mental well-being gitu. Are we okay? Do we enjoy what we do? Gitu kan.
Yes.
Tapi then how do people get over that? Also on one hand, how do people handle building their own self-esteem and confidence? Misalnya kayak tadi in your example in the classroom gitu. Tapi in the other case, misalnya kayak kerjaan yang beda gitu. How do people get over that ego gitu? How does your psychological approach to that?
So in my own practice, I like to use different theoretical and therapeutic approaches, but I really resonate with what's called acceptance commitment therapy. So in ACT, or acceptance commitment therapy, we focus on moving forward in your life, despite you feeling depressed, despite you feeling obviously sad or whatever struggles that you have. How do I get closer to be more in line with my values? Ya. Jadi, okay, aku udah di Australia nih. What kind of a person do I want to be in Australia? Right? It's almost like a second chance, right? As a migrant. What kind of a person I want to be? And then second, what matters most to me? Right? What are my values? Is it about learning? Is it about growth? Is it about connection or kindness? And then, okay, setiap hari nih, or even when we make decisions about work or how we want to show up in a classroom, for example, if we're a student, what can I do? What behavior, what action can I do that's in line with my values? And the more we do that, the happier we are. The more well-being we'll experience, because you're staying true to you, to your values.
But how do we decide what our values are?
Yeah, so that's a lot of reflection, yeah, self-reflection. Dan itu juga harus filter nih suara-suara orang tua, suara-suara guru, and then actually like with my clients we have like a set of cards of examples of values, and then you might take a few days, might take a few weeks for you to go through them and actually pick what's my top 10, or even you can group it in different domains. Okay, in relationship, these are my values. In workplace setting or career, these are my values. In I don't know, in personal development, these are my values. And you can use that to kind of guide your actions, guide your behavior. Because the great thing about values is you can't fail. It's not like a goal, right? Biasanya kan, goalnya, mau ngambil undergrad, terus kita dapat. Mau habis itu goalnya mau ngambil master, habis itu kita dapat. Kalau values, it can be something really small. If my value is kindness, something really small, what would you do, Billy, that shows kindness today? Something really small today.
Bisa tadi pas ketemu say hi, say hello, gitu kan, senyum.
Yeah, it can be as simple as senyum. Yeah. And that's you are in line with what you value. Yeah.
Nah,
jadi nggak bisa gagal.
Nggak bisa gagal. But then I think it might be easier for us to look at in hindsight, kita nggak bisa gagal gitu. Tapi to get through that first hurdle, pasti mereka mikir ya nggak bisa dong gitu. Padahal kan there's always that first obstacle kayak, especially if they're redefining their values, di mana mereka reflect, ini are these actually my values atau ini value-value orang tua saya, komunitas saya, gitu kan. Nah, how do people get over the fact that changing those values might not feel like them, kayak berubah value kayak oh enggak, I don't think that's me, kayak it feels fake gitu. Ada nggak yang kayak gitu?
It shouldn't feel fake,
It shouldn't feel
right?
fake.
It shouldn't feel fake because it's yours. That's why the most important thing is that what matters to you, not what matters to, being a successful person according to your parents. And it's not nggak set in stone lah gitu. Like it can change too. Values are fluid and it can change depending on what stage you are at in your life. So if confidence is not something that you value, but you value, maybe being a contributor, then maybe you can do things that lead to making meaningful impact or making a contribution to something based on that value. And then in a way, you would be kind of showing confident behavior or confident action by being a contributor, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
So now I was listening to this podcast on how to speak gitu. How to speak both in a public setting tapi as well as how you would practice your own speech juga gitu. And it was interesting to see that menurut yang si expert ini gitu, dia ngomong kadang-kadang orang kalau misalnya ngomong you have to speak louder atau you have to enunciate better, get your hands out of the pockets gitu. Jangan jangan cross your arms terus gitu, because like then that translates to less confidence gitu, perceived confidence. Terus itu kadang-kadang orang ngomong kayak, no, I mean I am just shy, kayak that's not me gitu kan. Terus and then I think it was really interesting. So now this expert, he said that your voice isn't a tool, tapi it's an instrument gitu. It's just a matter of how well do you play it, do you know how to play it gitu kan. Jadi it shouldn't feel fake, tapi it's just something that you haven't practiced yet.
Yes.
Gitu. Is there any similarities with your psychological approach to that?
I think and I think those people who teach into what do you call it, public speaking and so on, they also talk about posture, right? And if you change your posture, you actually feel confident. So it is almost like you fake it, and then you make it kind of thing. But it's interesting because in psychology, especially for people who are depressed, we also talk about the importance of, so behavior is linking to our action. And behavior links to our mood. So, sometimes kita kan nungguin, ini kalau misalkan aku moodnya udah bener, aku deh baru keluar deh sama kalian, baru nonton footy bareng deh, atau baru ke klub deh, atau apa gitu kan. Tapi kalau namanya depres ya, kalau nungguin sampai moodnya
gak beres-beres.
But if you go out, right, and then you see, my team is winning, and then you get that sense of hope, and then my friends are cheering, and I'm cheering with them, and I can get that happiness. So it's sometimes you need the action first before you get the feeling, before you get the emotions. So bukan fake it to make it sih, tapi the actions first can lead to better outcome, better emotions, and so on.
Pokoknya you have to place yourself in situations that could make you better gitu.
Correct.
Daripada dari awal lu bilang enggak deh gitu.
Kalau enggak deh di kamar terus ya
sama lagi gitu.
Iya.
Nah, sekarang ngomongin yang tadi self-esteem pas your early experiences sebagai mahasiswa juga di sini. Dulu tahun berapa kesini? 2000?
Harus kasih tahu ya. 2007, 2006.
2006.
Ya,
S1.
Yes.
And then lanjut S2.
S1 terus got into honors.
Yep.
That was in Brisbane, and then moved to Melbourne for my masters. Yeah.
Nah, so how did you overcome that initial kayak di kelas angkat tangan gak ya? Ngomong gak ya? Atau aku diem aja deh gitu. Kayak how did you get over that?
Years of that. Yeah.
Gimana?
I think if I can go back to that decolonization, I guess deconstructing my colonization and actually believing that, we are not less than, we have things that we can share. We have things that's worth it, or worthy to share with others. I think, through lots of self-reflection and knowing that, at least, especially in the learning setting, that it's kind of a safe environment, and people or teachers that say there's no such thing as a silly question, that really helps, right? And also you're a tutor, so getting some support, like okay, I have my essay, I'm not used to writing in English, but I did go to my tutor a lot, and getting feedback, and that all helped with getting the confidence. So I think, again, the power of social support, I think, is very important as a migrant, but also a lot of self-reflection and questioning yourself, like are you really not capable? I think most of the time you are. So yeah.
And those earlier days for you, nearly 20 years ago now, gitu. Komunitas seperti apa sih yang Angela punya gitu? Apakah komunitas gereja atau mungkin kebetulan ada teman-teman yang kesini juga barengan?
Yeah.
Atau
I
siapa
was
sih?
really lucky.
Yeah.
Ada teman-teman yang datang bareng-bareng dari Indonesia, because it was like a training program. So I had a lot of my friends from Universitas Indonesia that come together. So we have that shared experience. So bisa curhat bareng-bareng. Aduh, pertama kali ngalamin harus bayar bill gitu kan. Gimana caranya? Dealing with finding part-time work. So that was, I was really lucky that way. But also going back to that, keeping my roots, or mempertahankan, I guess, nilai-nilai budaya atau budaya sendiri. I joined a Saman dance group.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then so we practice, and then we perform in different cultural events in Brisbane. So that, again, keep me connected to Indonesia, but also, okay, how can I share Indonesia, a little bit piece of Indonesia, to Australia?
Dari segi komunitas Indonesianya, lebih mantap di sini, Melbourne atau Brisbane?
Melbourne is like how many years of the Indonesian community. So I think, we have like, I'm not sure if you're aware of all the Indonesian communities. We have Perwira, Irawirya, and then obviously the PPIAS, and all those things. I think if you're up for it, look for it, and I'm sure one of those communities will, welcome you with open arms. So.
Nah, and in your clinical practice, kan tadi balik lagi, you operate out of a, I guess, religious-oriented practice. Was it Catholic?
It's a Christian. But it's not linked to a specific church. So again, it's open to all denomination, or even people from all faith. Yeah.
But does your approach to psychology is your approach informed much of your own religious understanding juga gitu, out of Christian beliefs? Atau is it is your belief and practice separated? Atau do you feel like a lot of it is combined?
We can't operate in a vacuum, right? So our cultural background, our religious background does impact on, how you view life and how you practice things. So there will be, I guess, some integration of, your faith and your culture in how I practice psychology. But again, in psychology, we are taught to be, objective.
Yep.
We're not to impose. We are to not judge, and so on. So, there's that ethical requirements as well, to keep you, I guess, non-judgmental and not non-imposive of your beliefs. Yeah.
So now I ask this because, apalagi terutama Indonesia yang salah satu negara yang paling beragama, atau religious,
ketuhanan yang Maha Esa kan?
Religion is mandatory gitu
yes,
ya.
Yes.
Let's phrase it like that gitu.
Yes.
Di sebuah negara di mana agama itu diharuskan, banyak yang ketika kesini ke Australia, yang negara yang lebih sekuler gitu, banyak yang merasa ada gap in their spiritual well-being gitu kan. So now we talk a lot about mental health and mental well-being gitu. How they adapt misalnya in the classroom atau at work with their job or whatever gitu kan. Tapi banyak juga yang merasa ada kehampaan dengan their religious connection gitu. Have you ever come across anyone in your practice yang ngomong kayak gitu juga, and how so?
Well, not so much, because again, I guess because I'm practicing in the
Yep.
in the Christian setting, so most of the people are already connected to some sort of a church or a religious community, and they actually see that as a protective factor,
Okay.
especially in a secular world
Yeah.
such as this. So it's good for them to kind of connect to their faith groups. Like for people who, Muslims, for example, they go fasting and, go to the prayers every day. That some people would say that that's probably like the highlight. They might be depressed, but those things are like their highlight of the week, So it's actually a protective factor. Because probably majority of, as you said, it's quite a secular world, and maybe people who are not within those communities might not understand your faith or the importance of faith.
Yep. Nah, at least in your experience, from a psychological approach, seberapa pentingnya sih komunitas agama itu, these religious communities gitu, in terms of welcoming that sense of belonging in a community?
Not just, I guess, religious, but community itself.
Community in general
is a very important protective factor for mental health. So the more connected you are socially, and we are social beings, then that's how we survive, right? Evolutionary. Kalau kita sendirian ya gampang digigit sama tiger kan, sama lion. But yeah, so the more connected you are, the best outcomes you have, less distress, or even if you experience psychological distress, you're more likely to be able to cope with those stress. Because I'm not sure if you're familiar with, the idea of social capital or modal sosial. You can tap in all the resources from that social network. So that's why it's, community, whether it's religious or non-religious, is very, very important for migrants, especially mental health well-being. So, when I was doing my master's, I was looking into refugees' mental health. Again, community, social support, social network. That the closer you have that, the stronger you have social support, just the better your psychological outcomes, even if you have traumatic background and so on.
Nah, for you personally tapi, apalagi di sini yang udah lumayan lama juga gitu, how did you overcome that sense of community and belonging? Misalkan tadi kan yang grup saman gitu kan, and a few other communities as well. Tapi banyak orang yang kesini, pas sampai sini terus mereka bingung gitu, nyarinya tuh kemana gitu, perlu ngomong ke siapa gitu kan. Udah dari awal aja udah ngerasa overwhelmed, terus udah pasrah sendiri aja gitu. Jadi what did you do gitu on those early days? Gimana caranya bisa ketemu mereka?
I think I mentioned maybe before the podcast about Indonesian meetup group.
Oh yeah,
and that's
yeah.
online. So start with, we have technology now. Even start online. Look up, meetup groups, or I don't know what's in at the moment, but because meetup was probably ages ago. But there would be apps, and there would be, on Instagram or Facebook, or like Indonesian groups. So I think start with online. Because then that's less pressure. And then maybe start with just attending. There's so many cultural events, right, in Melbourne. We're lucky in that way. Like, I don't know, Satay Festival or all those things. Start with attending one of those and see how you feel. Do you feel connected again to a community? And maybe your community doesn't have to be an Indonesian community. It can be maybe a sports community. It can be a community in your workplace. Yeah.
Nah, now in terms of Indonesian migrants nih, orang Indonesia yang baru kesini, kan balik lagi, orang Indonesia beragam macam gitu kan. Masa ada yang kesini yang tadi bersama keluarga gitu, bawa keluarga. Ada juga yang kesini mungkin 18-19, mungkin underage masih 17 kesini buat kuliah gitu. And from a variety of different backgrounds gitu. Jadi their own pain points and their own struggles pasti semuanya beda-beda gitu kan. Tapi for Indonesians yang baru sampai sini and they're hesitant to reach out for therapy or mental health help gitu, what advice would you give them? What are the first steps that they should take?
Yeah. I think knowing that you're not alone, right? So all these challenges that migrants have it is hard because it is hard. It feels hard because it is hard. So knowing that it is normal experience as a migrant, and also knowing that because we are, especially people in Melbourne, right? In Melbourne, it's a very culturally diverse community or population. So a lot of the allied health or even professional health professionals are trained in cultural sensitivity. So we are used to seeing people of various backgrounds. So rest assured that if you do seek help, then they are trained in terms of cultural sensitivity and cultural responsiveness. Another thing is, again, tap into your social network. Talk to people who have seek help. How do you go about it? Do you have any recommendations? But GP, if you do need a professional mental health, go to your GP, talk to them, and then they can provide a referral to.
Coba kalau ini episode disponsor VicGov, kayaknya lumayan deh. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic gara-gara itu balik lagi, especially in terms of people coming in from a migrant background yang kesini nggak tahu apa-apa, mungkin nggak kenal banyak orang gitu. Titik mereka mau minta bantuan aja juga bingung mau mulai dari mana gitu kan. So I think it's really good that at least we have this conversation supaya orang-orang juga merasa that they're not alone gitu kan. That help does exist and their worries and anxieties are valid gitu kan.
Correct.
Dan biasanya itu yang rintangan pertama gitu kan, knowing that you need help. Gitu kan. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Semoga ini berfaedah kepada orang lain juga gitu. And hopefully you continue to help other Indonesians juga di sini that need Indonesian language help.
Amin.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Billy.